Next up, we have Jason Swenk, host of the Smart Agency Masterclass podcast. His talk is called From Accidental Agency Owner to Handpicking Your Clients. Let's hear it for Jason Swenk.
Hey, Jason Swenk here, and I want to talk to you about going from an accidental agency owner to hand-picking your clients. I think that's what we all want, but we all start off in a place where we're an accidental agency owner. We knew how to do something cool, and then someone offered us money, and then we were off to the races. But then we were being reactionary to everything else. Now, I got my start because of Justin Timberlake. Now, I don't know Justin Timberlake, but one of my best friends looked identical to him. And so I created my first website really with the four of my friends called In Shit, kind of making fun of NSYNC because my friend looked like Justin Timberlake. And then it got popular. And then people started asking me to design websites for them. I started doing lawyer websites and real estate websites, marinas, started off really small, doing $500 websites, even though by the time we sold the agency, we were doing $1 million engagements for people. And we were especially in the very beginning, we were in this fun stage, right? We were getting work and we were really enjoying it, but it was starting after a couple years, it really started turning into, I realized I was depending on referrals, right? And I look at a business where if they have referrals or they keep constantly getting referrals and that's their only channel, it's not scalable. And so I also realized that we had a long sales cycle and we were taking on a lot of the wrong clients. And I have a motto now that there's no such thing as a bad agency client. There's only a bad prospect or a bad process. And hopefully I'll show you how to identify the bad prospect. And later on we can talk about the process. But when I was running my agency, I realized there are a number of different systems that would help us grow. But before I realized that, I remember one day coming into the office and really kind of looking at our bank account and doing budgeting. That's how we would do budgeting. Hopefully none of you are doing that. And I realized, I was like, oh my God, we're not going to be able to make payroll. And I was like, we're going to have to close down or even worse. And I remember going to my wife that night and she knew I was, frustrated for a long time now. And she literally looked me in the eyes and she said, why don't you just quit? Go get a job. And I was like, that hit me, right? That to me, that's the ultimate failure. And I was like, well, maybe you're right. Let me go interview. And so I started interviewing for a company called NASCAR. And at the time I raced cars and I was like, this would be a perfect fit. And they asked me two questions that really changed everything for me. They said, what do you want to do every single day? And what don't you never want to do ever again? And by answering these two questions, I gained clarity. I gained clarity for, what was my North Star? How could I make decisions? Because I was just being reactionary to whatever was coming to us because of referrals. And I kept getting referrals from the same types of businesses or lower, never above. So I was just stagnant. Does that sound familiar? Probably does. And I also needed to get clarity for what did I believe in? What were my core values to make sure I had the right people on the team? And so picture this. Picture you're on a boat and you you identify the right players and the right teammates and you put them on this boat from New York to London. Okay? But you don't tell anybody where you're going. So for about 7 hours, you're driving this boat, making course corrections, and then you're like, man, I'm just tired. I need, a break, and I need to go sleep. And so then what you do is you tell your crew, you're like, hey, if the boat changes course, come get me. I'll come up and change, put the boat on the right course. And what happens is every 5 minutes, they're waking you up, which is pretty frustrating, where you just want to get like that well-deserved rest, right? Where they're not waking you up. And all you really have to do is tell them where the boat's going. When I started realizing what I needed to do, I was the toll booth. Every decision was coming to me. They couldn't make a decision because I didn't know where we were going, or I didn't communicate that clarity to my team, because then my team started making decisions based on what's best for the agency rather than what's best for them, because I let them know the vision. I let them know the North Star. A couple years ago, my team we were writing blog posts of the top conferences. You guys were on them. Top conferences agency owners need to go to. And they listed out 2 of them. I was like, no, don't put those guys. I hate those people. And my team was like, well, are they good for agencies? I said, yes, they're good for agencies because our goal is to be the #1 resource in the world for a select few agency owners. And we wanted to create our why, our North Star, is to create a resource we wish we had. And so that enables my team in order to make decisions without me. So I'm not the toll booth anymore. So what I realized is there's 5 roles that I needed to do within the agency to transform from the owner to the CEO. The first one was, and I just told you this, set the vision, communicate it often. Right? That's the most important part. The next is I needed to coach and mentor my leadership team. I didn't need to coach everybody in the agency. I don't need to have everybody reporting to me. You shouldn't have over 5 direct reports. If you do, that's overwhelming. You can't coach and mentor them. You also needed to be the face of the agency. And a lot of people say, well, I can't be the face of the agency. Then everybody's going to come to us for all kinds of stuff. I said, have you ever heard of VaynerMedia? Yep. You know who Gary Vaynerchuk is? Yep. He's the face of the organization, but do you think he actually works on the projects? No. Okay, so that proved that model, okay? And then the next is assist sales, okay? Not do all the sales. You don't want to be that doctor that's giving out the insurance forms and walking people into the room and checking their temperature. You want to be that trusted advisor. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. And then you need to understand the financials. Now, when I achieved these 5 roles, and when I walk my clients through achieving these 5 roles, a lot of times they were like, man, that would be awesome. I'd have so much freedom to do whatever I want, pick and choose. And I tell them, be careful, you're going to be depressed in the very beginning. And you're like, yeah, right, Jason. And I was totally depressed because I remember going into certain like creative meetings or marketing meetings, and I'd be like, hey, can I help? No, we're good, Jason. And then I go into the next one, hey, can I help? No, I'm good, Jason. And I was like, I wasn't needed anymore. And then I realized that I wasn't needed for the things that I used to do, but I need to do these 5 roles, okay? So I was able to get that clarity and move on and move into a different role in order to be the CEO rather than the owner. So the first system really is clarity, and there's one exercise I want you guys to think about doing. Take a sheet of paper. So I skipped over this when I was telling you, when they asked me the question, what do you want to do every day and what don't you ever want to do? So take a sheet of paper and put your fist over that sheet of paper. Draw a circle around your fist. Everything outside that circle, I want you to spend like an hour doing, to just write down everything you don't hate. So I wrote down like project management, dealing with clients, like hiring process, like doing HR, like all that stuff. And then once you start eliminating all that, then you can actually go on to what is the stuff I want to do. And it's going to be like, setting the vision, assisting sales, right? Doing whatever you want. And then you can gain that clarity. And then once you have that clarity, now you can go on to what I call the second system, positioning. Now, there's so many different agencies out there that all look the same, right? When you go to their website. And there's tons of Me Too agencies of what I call it, because they're just modeling everything of what everybody does. But you have to understand, companies don't buy from agencies. They buy from agencies they trust and they understand. And let me explain, because they're telling a different story in the journey of the client or the prospect actually coming to you. So let's say we're at a conference right now in person, and I come up to you. I'm like, hey, Bob, how's it going? My name's Jason. And I'm like, what's your name? And you say, Jack. I'm like, okay. And then I just go into talking about how cool I am. Oh, I'm the best agency advisor in the world. We have the #1 podcast in the world, blah, 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 blah. You're literally going to shut off and you're going to be like, how do I get out of here, right? And I'm positioning myself as the focal point rather than positioning you as the focal point. So let's switch it up. If I came up to you, I was like, hey, Jack, how's it going? Why'd you come to the conference? What's your biggest challenge? Is there anybody I can introduce you to? What I'm doing is I'm asking questions, okay? I'm asking questions for putting that focal point on you, and I'm positioning you as Batman, okay? And I'm positioning, myself as Alfred. I'm not positioning myself, like if I make myself Batman, that makes you Robin. And I've never seen anybody want to wear those ugly green tights, right? You need to position yourself as Alfred, that trusted advisor. And it always reminded me of a story that my uncle told me. Now, he had one of the coolest jobs. He worked for Grumman, and he worked on the F-14 Tomcat. And one of his jobs was testing out the canopy, that glass that goes over. And the F-14 is like the jet that Tom Cruise used in Top Gun. That's the jet, my favorite jet in the world. And so he would test out these canopies. And the way you would test out these canopies is shooting chickens, dead chickens, okay, into the canopy. And they kept doing this, and they kept breaking the canopy over and over again. And they were just like, what is going on? And so finally, they wrote a letter to NASA, who acted as the trusted advisor, Alfred, and they wrote back one sentence: unfreeze the chicken. They were standing too close to it, right? So I think a lot of us are standing too close to it. And if we start thinking about what are the questions we can ask in order to change that focal point, you'll really make a difference. So let's go into system 3, where we're going to talk about your offering, right? Now, if I come up to you right away and I say, buy my big retainer, you're going to treat it as like I'm walking up to you and saying, will you marry me, right off the bat? And I know if I went up to my wife the first time I saw her, she would have been like, no way, get away from me. And so what you need to do is you need to build trust. And the easiest way to build trust is what I call doing a foot in the door offer, okay? And this is where you're going to create something that's easy for them to make a decision and low risk. I was working with an agency client a while ago, and let's say they had a $5,000 a month retainer. And I asked them, how long do you have these engagements? And basically, he would have, he's like, it's month to month. And I said, okay, well, how long do they usually stay with you? He's like, 3 months. I'm like, okay, well, that's, or maybe 6 months. So he's making, a small amount of money. I'm like, well, why don't you have yearly contracts? Well, it's harder to sell, and it's easier to sell this way. I said, okay. Would you like a way in order to charge a lot more? Sure. So I said, well, what could you actually do in order for them to make a decision quicker and make it less risky? Could you do something that would be like an audit or discovery or a blueprint where you actually map out a plan, a high-level plan with them? When we were designing a lot of websites back in the day, one of our foot in the doors, and this was a cold calling strategy, we literally would find people that were spending over $10,000 a month in AdWords. And we'd call them up and we'd say, hey, we noticed you're spending over $10,000 a month in AdWords. We certainly, at that amount to spend back then, there's a lot of overspending and wasteful spending. And we offer a service that will actually look at this and put a plan together to make sure your dollar goes as far as you can. And we charge $2,500 for this. We didn't even do pay-per-click back then. We would outsource that, but we used that to get our foot in the door. So with this SEO company, I said, let's do an audit and putting together a plan for them, a high-level plan that you actually work with them on it. And then once you work with them on that plan, you ask them, say, well, do you think this plan is working? Or like, do you think this will actually work? And they'll say yes, because you built it with them. And then what you'll do is you'll position a 3-month project. So I asked them, I said, how long does it usually take you to show results? And he's like, 2 months. I'm like, perfect. Let's do a 3-month project that you position in the foot in the door session, and you position that for over 90 days. And so when the client starts seeing results, what you'll start doing is saying, well, I'm glad you're seeing results. I think we can even escalate it even more, and then you can position the retainer. If you wait to the very end of that project, they're already kind of shutting off. And so what happened, right? You remember, they're only making $30,000 because after 6 months, they're basically canceling, which is a whole nother story. Well, we charged $2,500 for the initial blueprint that they used to actually even give away. And a lot of you may actually be giving this away if you think about it, right? Already. So now you're charging for this strategy and you're working with them, so they're gaining trust, you're building rapport. And then you do the project, which is still low risk for them, and you do the project, and then you position the retainer for 12 months. So the project was $15,000, so plus $2,500, and then they would sell an $87.50 a month retainer for 12 months. That would auto renew. So now they're at least making $112,000. Some on change, math nerds don't get on to me. It's over $100K per client that they get by structuring the right offer. Okay, makes sense? Great. So now we can get into prospecting because I see so many people just wanting to dive into prospecting, but now you understand you have to build the right foundation. You have to get that clarity. You have to have the right position. You have to have that right offering. Okay, so now we're in prospecting, and I looked at it. A lot of people have one channel with referrals, which just isn't scalable. But I wanted to actually develop I look at it as like a stool, right? I wanted a 3-legged stool because I could sit down on it. If one leg breaks, cool, I still can balance. If 2 legs break, I still can balance. And so inbound channel I wanted to create. I wanted to create content where people can actually come to me, find me, SEO, pay-per-click, all that kind of stuff. But I also need an outbound channel because a lot of people just dive into marketing and inbound, but then they leave off the outbound, which now they can kind of control because it's very easy. Like I was telling you the example of calling people that were spending over $10,000 a month. And then the third is strategic partnerships. We did this with Microsoft. We did this with Sitefinity. This is how we landed some major accounts. We started figuring out the people that we're already going after, the technologies, the publications, the conferences, the influencers in the market, and we would actually partner with them. Now, when we were reaching out to them, we're not being like, hey, give us this. We actually, whatever we wanted them to do, we would actually do for them, which would kind of reciprocate later on. Now, one of the best strategies, and I hope that you're watching, that you already have a podcast. I was in New York not too long ago, before all this crazy pandemic stuff, and I was in a room of 850 agency owners, and I asked, how many of you have a podcast? And literally it was like 4 or 5, and I was like, oh my God, look at the opportunity. And so I started telling them, the opportunity that they could do in their agency and really escalate and really knock off all 3 of these channels. And I said, what if you actually were able to call all these people and invite them on a podcast? So this is your outbound strategy. And then have them on your podcast, interview them, create amazing content for your inbound efforts, but it's also an outbound. I have a couple mastermind members and clients that they close 50% of the people that actually come on their podcast. 50%. So I'm telling this audience about this, and these gentlemen come up and they said, will you be on my podcast? I'm like, of course. As soon as you record 10 episodes, I'll be more than happy. And they were like, well, I want you to be the first. I was like, oh, okay, I'll do it since you came up. And they were like, in my hotel room. And I'm like, so it was the weirdest one. I've never done a podcast interview up to then into a hotel room, but they didn't kill me. But it was really cool. And their podcast is really grown and done very well. And just like everybody else's. And as soon as agency owners commit to doing a podcast, it knocks out all 3 channels. So now that we have the prospecting, let's focus on sales. Now, we don't want to go after or look at us as that sleazy salesperson, right? That sleazy salesperson, which is that awful picture that whenever you Google sleazy salespeople. And you want to make sure you're chatting with the right prospect, because it's pretty frustrating when you deal with people for sometimes weeks, sometimes months, sometimes years, and then they say, oh, I went with someone else, or I don't have the budget or any of that. So I have something for you to remember, and I want you to remember NBAT, okay? It stands for need, budget, authority, and timing. So and I would always train my sales team, whenever we're talking to a prospect, they're doing this right away. We're figuring out, does their need match up with what we do? If it doesn't, we move on. So that's self-explanatory. But the next is, what is their budget? Now, in a room, I always ask, how many people ask for the budget? It's usually about 50%. And then I ask, out of those 50% that actually ask, I say, how many actually get the budget every single time? And it's like maybe 10%. So I want to give you an opportunity in order to get that budget 99% of the time. And it's called my budget buster, okay? I nicknamed it that. I don't know why. But whenever I ask someone, what's your budget for doing, this project? And they'll be like, I don't know. I don't have a budget. You tell me. I'm like, cool, I love working with people that don't have a budget. So we don't have to worry about money. We can test out everything. And I kind of mess with them. And then I go into what I call the reverse auctioneer, where it's like I start really high. Okay, it's real important you start high because they're going to really remember the first number. So if you say, oh, are you trying to stay around 1,000, 2,000, 3,000? They're always going to remember 1,000. So I go, are you trying to stay around 1 billion, 1 million, 100,000, 50,000, 10,000? What's your range? So I know if I can actually help you out or what we can chat about. And so that's how you get the budget. If they still don't know the budget and you know they're a qualified company, then I would suggest selling a foot in the door in order to develop that budget for them. The next is the authority, okay? You have to figure out, and you can't figure that out by the title. So the easiest way to do that is asking them, all right, based on what you told me you need, how does this line up with your overall company objectives? And only the real decision maker will be able to do that. So if they go, I don't know, well, who knows? Bob. Who's Bob? He's the CEO. Oh, cool. Can we get them on the call? It's the easiest way to bring them in. Then the last part is timing. If they expect something done in an unrealistic time, run. Because remember what I told you in the very beginning, there's no such thing as a bad agency client. There's only a bad prospect or a bad process. And they're a bad prospect. So run. So after we qualify them, we really want to go into the questions to figure out, what are they want? So I want you to remember the 3 I's. What is the biggest issue that you're having right now with getting what you're trying to get? Okay, so when you do this, then you can, and you have to be an investigator on this because they'll lie to you. So if they come to you and go, and I want more leads. Why do you want more leads? Right, and you have to define that and figure out what's the biggest problem with your leads. Is it the website, whatever it is, and then we have to go into what is the impact that the issue is causing on their business. What is the impact if we fix it that they have? So if you determine if you build a lead generation system for them and it's going to bring in $1 million, they're golden. Now, here's the important thing. You cannot tell them the impact. You have to ask them the right questions for them to determine the impact, because then they'll believe it. Think about if I go, buy this course and you'll make $1 billion. You're not going to trust me. But if I can ask the right questions, I wish I could develop a course and make you $1 billion. That'd be cool. But if I could develop the right questions, right, in order to have you go, oh my God, he can make me $1 million. My life will be so much easier. And then you ask them, how important is this to them? Because this is a great follow-up. Because let's say we've all had those prospects where we've sent the proposal to them and they've you constantly keep following up with them. And you keep following up and, hey, Jane, I'm just checking in. Right? That's a begging strategy. But imagine if you could call Jane and be like, hey, Jane, I haven't heard from you in a month, so I assume you solved that $1 million lead generation problem. Oh, no, you haven't. Is that something that's important to you? Oh, I'm glad I called too, so we can actually engage in that. Now, I want to tell you a quick tip on the proposal, okay? And it's important to do this because how many of you actually have sent out and spent time on a proposal, send it out, and then the client go completely silent, right? I've had this happen many times for many years. And what I realized was if you want to stop that and eliminate that, stop sending the proposal, okay? And you're probably going to be like, well, how do they review the proposal? You review it with them. So you say, and basically before you even do the proposal, you should be asking the right questions and asking them, like, if we put this together, are you ready to go? Yes, right? Qualifying them. But what I would do is I'll be like, well, cool, let's set up a time to review this. And then we can walk you through it. And then a lot of you may be thinking, well, my clients just say, send me the proposal and I'll let you know. I want to review it ahead of time. It says, you have to stand your ground. You remember this, you're either training them or they're training you. And if they're not going to listen to you as a prospect, they're not going to listen to you as a client later on. So what I would say if they go, just send it to me, be like, that's not our process. If that's important to you, I certainly understand, but we may not be the best fit for you. We want to be able to have the opportunity to walk you through the proposal and customize it based on your needs and what you want. And then if they say no, they walk away, their boss, like, you get rid of those fishing. But a lot of times, about 80% of the time, people come back, oh yeah, I talked to my boss, they want to meet. Now, you're probably thinking about, what about RFPs, right? And I want to go over kind of what RFPs stand for, or what's, but before I tell you what they stand for, do you guys know the 2 winners in every RFP? It's the first one out and the first one that wins, okay? Those are the only 2 winners. So I always like to be the first one out. But what RFPs really stand for, is request for punishment and real effing problem. That's how I looked at it. We didn't do RFPs unless we actually wrote it. So that's my biggest tidbit for you on that. And the last thing I want to leave you with is if you're constantly saying you're too busy, you're not charging enough. And we need to look at your pricing in order to raise it, because if you can charge more and you can make more profit, you can hire the right people. If you can hire the right people, you don't have to do everything. If you don't have to do everything, you have that freedom to pick and choose of what you want to do. Now, I've covered 5 systems. Now, there are 3 other systems from delivering and making sure you're avoiding scope creep, making sure you have the right people in the operations process and you're building cash flow, and making sure you have the right leadership team and you're doing the right leadership team. So go to Jason Swenk and you can check out that if you want to dive into it. But and if you have any questions, comment and we'll get your questions answered. And I just thank you for giving me your time. And until next time, have a swank day.